Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and joining me, as always, is my co host, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, our Canes have the week off, so I thought we would discuss the latest batch of rankings and seedings from the CFP committee. And as you would expect, everyone loved them, and there were zero issues. That obviously did not happen. But what stood out? What stood out?
Everyone's always in agreement in college football. I know what you're talking about.
Clearly, you know what I mean? And so, what stood out to you the most when looking at these latest batch of rankings?
Oh, there's a lot of favoritism. I mean, like watching a one-loss team, and I'll be biased for a second, and seeing us plummet, which, by the way, we all knew was going to happen. It's not like, oh, shocker, Miami goes
Yep.
down 9 spots. But like, hey, man, it's one loss. It's not the end of the world, especially in this current landscape of ranking. So seeing a few teams still ranked ahead of Miami with 2 losses is a little unnerving.
Yeah, I thought it was a big showing for the Big 10. They have 4 out of the top 5. I'm not exactly sure how that even works out, considering 2 of them, Penn State and Indiana, who, again, I love the Cinderella story of Indiana. You know, I'm rooting for the Hoosiers, but how they're the 4th and 5th ranked teams. Because, like, here's the thing. Seeding is different than the actual rankings, right? And from what I was understanding from the college football committee was that they would rank the teams that they thought were the 25 best teams, and then from there seed them. And so that's the biggest issue that's been going on this week is how do you have a 4th ranked Penn State and a 5th ranked Indiana who haven't played anyone? They have probably one of the weakest schedules. And then you
Mhm.
have a team like Georgia who has the number 1 strength of schedule. And I think it's like a top 5 strength of record, meaning how are the teams doing that they're playing, right?
Yep.
Um, and even though they have 2 losses, they're all the way down at 12 and could potentially miss it if it was to start today. I think when things play out, they most likely will not, especially if they win out. I don't think they'll miss the playoffs. But I think the biggest issue we have to remember is while the committee is trying to pick, quote unquote, the best teams, I think what they're really trying to do is pick the best brands, right? Because I think they're trying to figure out what will sell ad space, what will fill the seats at these games, and honestly, what people are going to talk about. And I think, again, tinfoil hat theory, because you know I love my tinfoil hat theories. I think they're kind of playing with it because if you look at week 1 compared to week 2, it's very different. And like BYU and Indiana, everyone was talking about last week how they were disrespected, jumped up. How convenient, right? And then now you have people like freaking about to pillage and riot because of Georgia. Something tells me Georgia's going to find its way back into the seedings going next week. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, look at the way they seeded them right now, or the way they're ranked right now. That all takes care of itself towards the end of the year because those teams still have to play others, and some of them aren't even going to make their conference championship game with their current record as is. That's the Big Ten I'm staring at right there because we all know it's a top-heavy league. We know it's like really a 2-horse race between Oregon and Ohio State. Penn State's going to fall out of that somewhere. Indiana, look, love the story. It's going to fall out somewhere. If you're talking about playing up brands, Indiana's a basketball brand. They're not really a football school. That's not going to last.
Exactly. I would totally agree with that. I would absolutely agree. I think to me, the biggest issue I have with the committee is the lack of transparency. I think there
Yep.
needs to be an explanation for a lot of things. You know what I mean? And even if they just say, like, hey, like, we just didn't know what to do with Georgia, so we put them at 12. You know? Like other issues that I kind of noticed with the ranking is like, how do you put South Carolina ahead of LSU despite the fact that LSU won the head to head? Because that's part of the criteria.
On the road.
Yeah,
On the
exactly.
road at South Carolina. Granted, that was a little bit of a scuzzy finish, but at the same time, that was the record.
Right.
So how can you say that that's better?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm like, where are they ranked? How are they ranking these teams? You know what I mean? And like, what exactly is the criteria? Because if they're going with, again, the criteria that they're talking about, they're not using head to heads. They're not using strength of schedules. I mean, is it the wins that they're valuing? Is it the losses that they're valuing? It's very strange to me. I thought another thing, I saw a graphic during the week, which I thought was really interesting, was that of the top 20 teams, there Ohio State, Miami, Texas, Clemson, Iowa State, Indiana, and Pitt all have 0 wins over ranked teams. So it's like it can't be the wins, right?
Can't be the wins. I mean, look, I think it's an entertainment thing. If you're looking at this college football playoff, putting out rankings and seedings well before the actual playoffs happen is all for entertainment. It's all for getting just like what the AP poll does in the preseason of like finding, hey, we can get really great TV numbers if we make this team this seed and this team this ranking too when they play each other in the regular season, because they'll play up that narrative of, oh, this is a de facto elimination game, or the winner of this is going to get in the playoff. And it's all for ratings. So really, it doesn't matter until the last piece comes in, and then we also get to just complain like crazy on Tuesdays. It's the Kardashianization reality TV version of what sports have become.
Yeah, I think another thing that I am really just kind of like, it's like irking me is what would you consider the reverse of like a bias? Like, what would you call that? Like, I don't
Oh,
even.
that's so the opposite of a bias is it's what you call the media against Miami. We always call it it's a oh my god. I literally had the term
I
and I just lost it.
I say that because like everyone's like trashing the ACC, and it's like I really think like I'm gonna throw up a graphic really quick of like you can see in this graphic right here, you can see SMU is out, right? Like SMU is clearly out of contention at this moment. But when you look at SMU and you look at Miami and you look at the teams in the ACC, right, that are playing, if you look, the ACC is 3-2 versus the Big 12. They're 3-2 versus the Big 10, and they're 2-5 versus the SEC. But there is a contingent upon that, right? There's a major contingent upon that. There's still a bunch of games left where you have who do you have? You have
Clemson plays
You
South
have
Carolina.
Clemson plays South Carolina. FSU plays UF, which who knows where that could go? Because that's again, my favorite term. You know where I'm going with this. You know where I'm
Yeah,
going with.
it's
It's
a
a Timmy
rivalry
Jimmy.
game. You throw it out.
It's a Timmy Jimmy
It's
fight.
everybody.
It's the Timmy Jimmy fight right there. Last game
Well,
of the season.
okay, well, wait. Let's stop there real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Which one is Timmy? Which one is Jimmy?
Okay, Timmy, I think has to be FSU because Timmy wears a red shirt, and then Jimmy wears a blue shirt, and that's what UF is. So that's and like, let's face it, when you think of Timmy, what does that sound like?
Yeah,
It sounds like
exactly.
someone from Tallahassee, right? It
That's
sounds
it
exactly.
really does.
And then like a stuttering person, I would definitely go someone from Gainesville. Like to me, it's
Um,
like it just rides it. So, but then you have Louisville versus Kentucky. I definitely think Louisville will beat Kentucky, so that'll definitely be a win in the win column. I really
yeah.
think Clemson can beat. I mean, I think didn't Clemson beat? Didn't South Carolina beat Clemson last year?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think Clemson will want revenge this year, and they're clicking. I mean, yes, they lost to Louisville. That was a horrible loss, but I think that just like how we lost to Georgia Tech, I think that's hopefully going to like light a fire underneath them. And so it's like we could two of those, and so it would be a four out of five, four
Yep.
versus five, right? For the ACC versus. So we have a winning record against every conference except the SEC, and we only lost by one game. So it's like,
Yep.
where's the disparity, right? And then let's look at the SEC really quick. It's like the SEC has only one winning record. You know what I mean? Like against a conference. And most of the teams they played were not even of equal stature. So like when you're looking at like, oh, who like the SEC is, let's say 5-2 against the ACC, right? When you look at the teams that they played, it's like Bama versus Wisconsin. Would you say Wisconsin is a comparable team in the Big Ten compared to Bama in the SEC?
No.
Exactly.
And that was the one game before Wisconsin kind of went on a roll. That's the one where Tyler Van Dyke got
Dyke
hurt.
got hurt. Yeah. So it's like you don't even know what Wisconsin was going to be, but I wouldn't even stack them. I would say Wisconsin, especially this year, but even in the last 4 years, is a C tier team in the Big Ten. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're maybe just above 500, but they're not like competing for a title. They're not a few games out. Like they're just the C tier team, right? Then you have LSU versus UCLA. UCLA is garbage except for the last 2 weeks. You know what I mean? But when they played them, so it's like an LSU I would say is a B tier team in the SEC. UCLA is a D tier team in the Big Ten. You
They're
know what I
playing
mean?
right now against Washington. I'm fully expecting them to get just blown out.
Yeah, and then you have Texas versus Michigan, which sounded like a semi comparable, but when you really look at it, Texas was an A team. Michigan at best was a B team, but I think what we're seeing is a C minus team. So again, those aren't comparable. And this was the most egregious one to me. This was the most Ole Miss versus Wake Forest.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
literally bottom feeder versus a title contender. Like the
Yeah.
Ole Miss could play for the SEC championship. You know what I mean? I doubtful, but like if chaos ensues, like they easily could, and they could. They are in right now in the playoff if like where they're ranked. And so to me, I'm just like, again, a lot of these wins, it's like
Yeah.
I don't see the discrepancy. I don't see the disparity between the SEC. I mean, yes, when you think about it, when you go on brand and you think about those things, yes, SEC powerhouses, but it's not showing in the records.
No, I mean, look, the only thing you really have for a true apples to apples comparison is to take one of your terms. The only real Timmy Jimmy fight that's happened between the ACC and the SEC was Cal going down to Auburn and beating them in their own house this year early on in the year. That's really the only thing because Cal is a bottom feeder right now in the ACC, and Auburn is probably close to dead last in the SEC as well
Yeah,
for what they're doing.
but the thing, yeah, that's comparable. But here's a crazy thing about the difference between, and this is really a great example of what I want to highlight on is you take Cal and Auburn, right? You would say they're both bottom feeders of their respective conferences, but if you look at Cal, they have been competitive. It's not like they're getting blown out. It's not like they're losing these games. They're losing close games, especially at the beginning of the season, and they're
Yep.
losing heartbreakers. Auburn is flat out losing. They're
Losing.
just not good. I mean, that is a dumpster fire in itself. You know what I mean? And they're definitely not going to beat Alabama. They're not even. I don't think they're even remotely compete with Alabama. So it's
No.
like again, you're looking at. That's a great example of two schools that would roughly be on the same list based on their schedule and their record this year. But one team, I'm telling you, again, if you played Cal and Auburn 5 more times, 4.5 out of those 5 times, I'm putting money on Cal.
Yeah.
I
And
good.
yeah, and what you talk about too, like we actually closed the reaction show with a very similar theme in the sense of you line up one of those two teams from either conference. The really only thing that matters is are ACC officials involved in officiating that game? Are the refs ACC refs? Because throw it out the window, we don't know what might happen. They're not going to favor the ACC, but
Yeah.
you can say that like the entire playing field gets flattened because who knows what kind of play is going to happen out of that.
Yeah, so I kind of also want to look at the bracket right now and then look also at the standings. So basically, you have SMU out. How does Miami, Rudy, or how does the ACC get two teams into the playoffs?
They don't. It's just the eyes of the committee. They don't. Like, look, the fact that FSU went 13-0 last year, as terrible as that team was without Jordan Travis, I think they earned the right to get absolutely annihilated in the playoff in terms of like just based on resume of what they did. They
Yeah.
should have gotten in. They were not going to be competitive, but they deserved the spot. You could say the same thing about SMU. Let's say hypothetically, Miami comes back. They beat Wake Forest. They beat Syracuse. They beat SMU in Charlotte. They get the bid to go in. SMU's left on the way out. They're on the outside looking in. For them to, I don't know. They probably have to like blow out the next two opponents on their regular season and hope that they play it close against Miami. And hey, the way Miami's defense is versus SMU's offense, that's totally possible. So that's the only way they get in unless they win.
So, I mean, here's how I actually have like a theory of how we get two teams in, right? So, Ohio State plays Indiana next weekend, I believe. If Indiana gets blown out, like a Missouri versus Texas A&M or a Missouri versus Alabama, I think they're going to drop completely out of the standings because it's again, it's their only test of the season. And if you
Yep.
fail brutally, you're not getting in. So
Yep.
we lose Indiana in that aspect, right? If Tennessee this weekend, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, gets blown out by Georgia, again, you're gonna have a 2-loss Tennessee team, and when you look at at who's making it in, right? As of right now, you have Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, and Ole Miss who are going to make the playoffs, right? Well, boom, there goes Tennessee, right? You throw in Georgia in its space, and then you'll have Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, which I think it's pretty standard. I think that's pretty like on the nose, right? But you'll be missing that Indiana team, right? From the Big 10, right? And then that's how if UM and SMU play a close game, which it probably almost certainty is what it's going to be. I think you'll have an argument for allowing, and especially like if BYU blows the brakes off Colorado, if Colorado makes it, I think you can easily get that. And then again, Boise State plays Boise State,
Nobody.
San Jose. No, they play San Jose, I think is what it is, which who Is it San Jose or is it San Diego State? It's one of the two.
Well,
But
you looking for an Aztec or a Trojan
yeah,
because they're two different. Yeah.
but here's the thing though, like, and this is like kind of what I'm like really interested in seeing is like I didn't think Texas Tech would beat Iowa State. I didn't think Kansas would beat Iowa State. There are these teams that are like that are just off, like they're like a cow, right? Who aren't that off that could easily make it, that could easily just spoil a season. And I think if that does happen again, because we're going to see either Indiana, Tennessee. I don't think Alabama's going to make it to the championship game. And then
I'm
I think,
excited.
yeah, yeah, I mean, those two teams right there, Tennessee and Indiana, they're going to switch. You'll have one space left open. And I think if SMU plays their cards right, and again, if SMU for the rest of the season continues blowing teams out too, I think it'll be really hard because again, with Rhett Lashley, you saw that Rhett Lashley clip, right? Talking about the ACC
Yep.
this week. Just the fact that that got coverage alone and people are starting to pay more attention to that. I think that's how the ACC. I don't think it's probable. It sucks that that's the way it is because there's a bit of bias, I think, in all of this. But when you look at the SEC, I mean, I kind of gave you my hand. What do you what do you think? Who do you think is going to make it from the SEC?
I don't want to spoil a prediction for later, but I have a feeling that one of the favorites is not going to make it should they lose this weekend. I just need to know who's playing at home, and that's going to help determine that. So I feel like because they were favoring the Big Ten so heavily, I think with a couple losses, they might just give one of those spots to an SEC team, whether it's granted or not. ACC wise, though, with Rhett Lashley and SMU, I feel like they're almost kind of this is them playing like the U is back in a different form. It's just like,
Okay.
is the Pony Express back? And they just keep hyping them up. So they have to keep winning if that hype machine goes through. Because as much as SMU is in like a huge national brand, they are heavily invested and make a ton of money in terms of donor like support and
Oh yeah, they
they're,
raised 59 million this past offseason. 59 million.
the ACC isn't paying them jack squat for being in the conference this year. They paid their way in
Yep.
and said, we don't want any of the television money.
Yep.
We're good. So there's something to be said for that. But do I think the SEC gets like 4 teams in? Look, if any conference is going to do it, it's going to be them, but they're going to have a hard time really explaining it should the rest of the season play out the way that I think it's going to.
Well, I mean, you already have 4 SEC teams, 4 Big 10 teams already in based on the rankings right now. Again, we don't know where these rankings are going to go in the next like week or so because here's the thing, like every week it's been different. And I'm actually very intrigued to see on Tuesday where they're going to go after these games that we're going to talk about later today because are they going to kind of do like an AP thing where it's like an AP poll thing where it's like if you don't lose or you don't play, you don't really move? Or because like my biggest worry is if you look at the rankings, I'm going to go back to the rankings really quick. If you go back to the rankings, UM's at 9. Now,
Yeah.
if you remember last week, I think SMU was 13 and they had a bye week this past week and they fell one spot. Could
Yeah.
we fall another spot just because we're in a bye? And
Absolutely.
that would and again, that again, they would still seed us as the 4th seed, but that just makes me nervous when we're talking about rankings because like everyone talks about these rankings that matter. And yes, in the grand scheme of things, when we get to the end of the season and we get to the final drawing, yes, this week will not matter. But it will play a factor in where you're ranked because doesn't have a lot of space. We're playing Wake Forest and Syracuse, and then maybe an SMU team, unless we blow the brakes off, we jump them. And so you have not BYU, you have Boise State right there at 13. It's a little too close for comfort.
Define blow the brakes off against SMU. Is that like 66-59? Because that's the way the defense has been playing lately. It's like 60-30. Is that like that's a 30-point win, but you gave up 30, or let's say like 60-40. Like it's a 20-point victory, but you also gave up 40 points and 500 yards of offense to an SMU team.
Listen, baby,
With
you
like
didn't know
half their team.
you didn't know the ACC is the new Big 12. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, the circle of suck just got defensive sucking.
Yeah,
Now the offenses are great. It's
exactly.
just the defense.
Yeah,
It's a new Big 12.
it's going to be very interesting nonetheless. Do you think that Texas will lose to Texas A&M? Because no one's talking. Everyone thinks that's a foregone conclusion that Texas is going to beat Texas A&M, but Texas A&M is clicking,
If
and
you
they're
told
winning.
me,
And
yeah,
if you look at their schedule, I'm going to pull up their schedule while you tell me what you think. But I mean, I don't
I
know.
so when we did this mock bracket, I had A&M in the playoff over Texas because I thought that they would win
Really?
that game because the last game of the season is in Aggieland. It's in College Station. So it made me think, look, they already lost once this year at home to Notre Dame. They were embarrassed doing it. It'll probably not happen again. If anything, they may drop. I think they dropped the game on the road, but like they should not lose at home again. So for that fact alone, they could beat Texas. But that's really the only thing that I have playing on it. Do I think that A&M's a better team? No. Texas has looked bad a couple times, but like they find a way to pull it out. They're overall the better team position by position.
Yeah, A&M plays New Mexico State this week, and then next week they play. Let's see who they play really quick. Who does Texas A&M play? I think they have a bye week. Yeah, they have a bye week the week after, right before they play Texas for the
So
for the
there you
yeah.
go.
So yeah, I mean, oof, that's gonna be. And then who does Texas play? Texas play Kentucky. Ooh, Texas plays Kentucky next week. That's kind of
Yep.
interesting because
Yep. So they're going to
listen,
come in probably beaten up.
yeah, and Mark Stoops, yeah, he's got tricks up his sleeves, and he loves to play spoiler. That's just something that Mark Stoops is all about. He loves being a spoiler. So
Can I tell you how much I love Mark Stoops, by the way? Because he was Miami's defensive backs coach back in
yes.
the day when we were
Mhm.
actually good. And when he left and took, I forget if he went to Oklahoma and worked under Bob for a little bit before
He
taking
did like
Kentucky.
under 2 years. I think he worked there for 2 years, and then he got the Kentucky job.
Yeah, I was so angry when he left because immediately, just in the tank, things went on the defensive. I mean, don't get me wrong, we had good defensive backs that were left over from Mark Stoops, but then like you could just tell the continuity wasn't there after he left in
Yeah,
terms of
and that's how it is a
team.
lot of times with these coaches. Which going off a little bit off the beaten path right here, it's going to be interesting to see what Florida State does after they fired all of their coordinators and see who they can get into that building because who knows if Mike Norvell's there? Do they bring in someone like what's the guy? Who's the wide receiver coach from Ohio State? What's his name? He was a Hartline.
Oh
Brian
yeah, Brian
Hartline.
Hartline,
Brian
but would he
Hartline.
actually leave because he's an Ohio State guy?
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Here's the thing with Ohio State and Brian Hartline, right? Brian Hartline played for the Dolphins, so he's kind of a Florida guy a little bit. But here's the thing: they brought in Chip Kelly, so now you have two roadblocks to getting to that head coaching job because they're definitely not firing Ryan Day. And if they
Yep.
do fire Ryan Day, are they going to give it to Brian Hartline? I think they would probably hand it off to Chip Kelly in the interim, maybe give him a year before they even search that. But if they don't do it in house, the thing you do if you're FSU, and again, this is actually terrible that I'm doing this, but I mean, for God's sakes, you got to sometimes help the handicap. Um, if you're FSU, if you're smart, what you do is you give Brian Hartline a boatload of money, like almost borderline, maybe 100 grand less than what you would give Mike Norvell. And then you kind of give him the little wink, wink, nod, nod that like, listen, something tells me this next year's probably going to be a 4-win, maybe 5-win season if we're lucky, and boosters are going to lose their mind. So that'll be a way for us to get Mike Norvell out, and you'll be next in line. And then
I mean,
bam.
they need a guy who can recruit because Mike Norvell is not going to be it, and Brian Hartline has obviously been doing it with Marvin Harrison Jr. and now he's got Jeremiah Smith. So
I
like
mean, the
it's
guy
yeah,
the guy is a wide receiver whisperer. I mean, this guy
yep,
just sends wide receivers to the NFL like it's nothing. Like it's like you go to. I mean, that's why Jeremiah Smith went there. Like let's
yep.
keep it a buck. Like Jeremiah Smith would have easily taken the money and taken everything he would have been played at home, stayed at the crib, and went to Miami. But Brian Hartline was there. If Brian Hartline wasn't there, that wouldn't even have remotely been a challenge. That wouldn't like Mario would have signed that and locked that down immediately. So to me, it's
Yep.
like I think you need to get him out of there, and especially with all this talk of Dan Lanning going to the NFL, possibly. I don't think he will, but like, I mean, now you've got some space in here for Mario to like really spread his wings and fly in the recruiting battle, which again, it's going to be interesting to see. But
Did did you
go ahead.
see, speaking of Florida State, last thing before moving on, did
No,
you
good.
see that even Keon Coleman, their like star wide receiver transfer from the year before, was apparently telling people not to
Oh
go to
yeah.
Florida State because of the
No, yeah, no.
coaching situation? Yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible, and like that's
Yeah.
that's the issue, and like that's why they let him go. That guy, like Romp is what not I don't forget what his name is, but he was like a former wide receiver for FSU. It's just
Yep.
like, bro, like it's that when it's that bad, and by the way, that's not just a tell for the wide receiver, that's a tell for the whole coaching staff. That whole
Yep.
building is a mess. And
Yep. It has been.
I'm telling you, barring a miracle next year, I don't think Mike Norvell makes it out. I don't think he,
No.
he gets another year. I think next year you're going to see FSU go like 4-8, maybe 5-7 if they're lucky. And FSU boosters and fans are not going to. I actually just saw randomly there was like a booster channel that just came up on my feed for FSU that like the board of directors and the boosters randomly just posted a video. And I was like, when they're posting videos of them meeting online, it ain't good. It ain't good. But Rudy, you remember we were talking about earlier this year? We were talking about Project Rudy and your favorite CSFL
Yeah. Project Offside. Yeah.
project. Project Offside. Well, it looks like that actually is starting to get some legs on it because presidents and chancellors from the Big 12 and at least a portion of the ACC will meet next month to view formal presentations from leaders of the two proposed college football postseasons. The widely circulated and much discussed College Student Football League and Project Rudy would essentially end the NCAA's oversight of major college football, which is way overdue at this point. We need a league of some sort. We need a commissioner. And both would include a fraction of the current 134 member football bowl subdivisions and be funded by outside entities. Not sure how I feel about capital investment coming in. What do you think about that?
I don't like it either. It just when you get private equity involved, all it does is remove. We've talked about the tradition, the regionality, and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of just like they're looking at dollar signs and looking at what's profitable for them.
Right.
It's not so much what's good for the sport long term. Usually, private equity says we'll invest in this for 5 to 7 years. We're going to turn around and sell it. So, in terms of private equity, I don't know how I feel about it from a long term perspective.
Yeah, well, what I found interesting about the story is that sources told CBS Sports there's actually interest from a few Big 10 and SEC leaders about the meeting, but they eventually made the decision not to attend. They're like, we're not going to go. And actually, a good number of ACC presidents have shown interest and say they will attend. I thought what was really interesting was the fact that I think it was the North Carolina AD was like super pissed that like both Swanky and Patini were like, absolutely not. They're like, we're not doing this. We're not interested in this. And when they talk about Big 10 and SEC leaders who were showing interest, something tells me that's probably the bottom feeders. Those are your who would that?
Purdue,
Yeah, your Purdue's, I would say Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt's actually doing decent this year. I think Mississippi State.
Nebraska.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're getting this. And so, just a reminder, the CFL is the super league that would take the top 80 schools and create a single entity similar to the NFL. And then Project Rudy is a slightly different model that would include the top 70 schools with funding from Smash Capital, which is a private equity firm. And then that would infuse $9 billion into college football, the postseason, and do a whole tier revenue system. How how plausible are either of these things coming into the next? I mean, because again, this isn't going to happen till the grant of rights goes out in the 2030s. I think it's 2036 for us, and I think it's 2032 for the SEC and Big 10. I think that's 2034, something like that. It's basically between 2030 and 2036 is basically when the grant of rights will expire. What do you think? How plausible is this, Rudy?
You need ESPN's support because they have the pockets of the ACC, I'm sorry, of the SEC and the Big Ten. So whatever they get along with is going to be the winner. I don't think they do it without them. So hearing that some schools from the Big Ten might have attended or are interested in attending, it's probably fact finding. It's just what can we take, because people are going to have their little versions, and whatever we get long term is going to be a combination of all of these.
Yeah, Swanky said something that was really like eye glaring because it was almost like a subliminal to the rest of the NCAA where he was like, we're not really interested in it because anything that we thought was interesting about it, we could do ourselves. And it's not our job to come down to earth. It's their job to improve their brand. And
Yep.
with the Big 10 and the SEC doing this collusion thing that they've been working on, I'm a little it's I'm a little worried for the state of college football because again, like I was talking about, this whole meeting that's going to happen in a month is mainly ACC and Big 12, which
Yep.
are kind of like the have-nots. And so we could be seeing a giant schism in college football. Is there a potential, Rudy, you think, for college football to be split?
I will give you a different sports history with that actually happening. You have to go back to auto racing in the early to mid 90s when IndyCar split to the Indy Racing League and CART. And to this day, that series has still not recovered. So, in terms of what it looks like is a good idea because egos are going after each other. So, like, IndyCar had the Indy 500, but like CART slash Champ Car had all of the better drivers. It's caused almost irreparable damage to that sport. So that's why there's Formula One is so big as it is now, because it's got one unity, one governing body, and a lot of media rights behind it. So if college football wants to go that way, I would see something similar. I think it would be something similar that happens, and nobody really wins in the end, because if you don't have this possibility of having, major powers from other conferences playing against each other, you're going to start segmenting your audience. So this whole idea, like that we keep talking about regionality wise, no one's going to be watching Ohio State playing, USC for one national title. And then it's like hypothetically Miami and like Iowa State for another. What, they're going to start competing for national championships or like disputing national championships again? It's dumb.
Yeah, the only reason why I think it may come to that, and the reason why I suggest that, is because you're just seeing this collusion between the SEC and the Big Ten, and there's zero remorse to want to save the sport. Because here's my thing: like, if the SEC commissioner, if he really wanted to fix things, why not just come up with a solution then and say, "Hey, listen, guys, like, let's just make a committee." Like the college football playoff committee. You do that, but you do it for the league, and you
Yep.
create and you have a rotating commissioner, every year, like 1 year, because like just like the CFP, the CFP doesn't have the same group voting every year for the playoffs, which
Yep.
that in itself, yes, on the surface, it sounds, oh, that's a good idea, but that's actually a really bad idea, because 1 year you could have one committee who has this view of it, and then the next year have a completely different committee that has completely different motives and different like ways of viewing it and worldviews, and then you have like, it's like it doesn't even equal out, and we're kind of seeing that with the
Yep.
playoff right now, where it's like, well, is a 10-2 SEC team the same as a 11-1 a Big 10 or ACC team, or an undefeated Big 12 team? Like, how do we figure these things out? And again, I am the person who will fight for regionality and for tradition like no one else. But at some point, you have to recognize when the train is leaving the station, and you either get on the train or you get off the train. And
Yep.
the inevitable truth that we're facing right now in college football is there are haves and there are have-nots. And it's not just we can call it and we can dress it up as a conference issue, but it really isn't. It's a brand issue. You know what I mean? Because like I was giving all these things about the ACC and like ACC being snubbed, but if you look at it, we haven't been snubbed realistically. Miami, the brand itself, it's good for college football. When Miami does well, college football does well. And you saw that in this week's rankings, because the AP poll dropped us like 8 spots pretty much to 12 or 13, whatever it was. But the CFP only dropped us to 9 to keep us in. You know what I mean? And so why was that? I'll tell you why. It's because of brand, and it's because they know they can put people in the seats, and they know. I mean, just look at On 3. On 3 has like tripled its viewership alone just because they're covering Miami this year. And they know,
Yep.
and they say that. JD Pickell will tell you, Andy Staples will tell you, any of these guys will say, like, if you watch their stuff, that, hey, like, thanks, Miami viewers. Like, hey, thanks, Miami viewers. Why? Because we are a passionate fan base. And so, what does the CFP want? They want passionate fan bases. And so I say all of this because you're going to get to everyone just needs to stop holding on to the past. And again, this is coming from someone who loves tradition. This is coming from someone who loves regionality. And if you want to save this sport, you need to like you need to put the cart in front of the horse at this point, because if you don't, like, you're in trouble.
So are you saying that there could be like a college football version of the Hunger Games where like the SEC and the Big Ten form this like super league and then say by the way, you bottom four, bye. We're going to go picking who we want.
I think, as I know you're saying that a little tongue in cheek, I think that's what's inevitably going to happen. Because
Yeah.
here's the thing that's going to happen. And when the SEC goes to renegotiate, do you think Bama, Texas, Oklahoma, because here's the thing, remember, Texas and Oklahoma are coming in. They're going to play nice. They're not going to step on toes. They're going to do their thing. Texas, maybe not so much because their heads up their own ass. But you think when they renegotiate in a couple years, Texas is going to be like, yeah, we want Mississippi State deserves the same money we do.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. You think Alabama, and then once Texas says that, oh, believe me, people in Tuscaloosa are going to say the exact same thing. They're going to be like, there is no damn reason why Vanderbilt, even though they beat our asses a couple years ago, should be getting the same money as us. And I'm telling
What
you, that's what's gonna
what incarnation?
what in the double wide trailer is going on in here, you know? And here's the thing. I think the ACC is going to get desperate because remember, we did a story a few weeks ago that the ACC, Clemson, and Florida State picked up talks again to renegotiate. And the
Mm-hmm.
big contingency on that was a redistribution based on a pay for play or pay for success. I think
Mm-hmm.
that in especially with FSU season and the next couple 2 seasons FSU's probably going to have, they're going to be desperate to stay because no one's going to want them. The brand, in my opinion, uh, your friend Alex was talking about, I think today, where no one's talking about FSU's
Nope.
abysmal season.
Nope.
That should be sirens for FSU, because yes, you're completely irrelevant right now, but you want to be top of mind. You want people to be talking about you, especially if you want to jump ship to a bigger and better conference, i.e., the SEC or Big 10. When no one's talking about you, that means no one cares or wants you.
Yeah, I'll tell you something about Florida State. They really haven't had a good brand recognition since Bobby Bowden retired. Because as
I'll
much
agree
as
with that.
since they won the national championship with Jameis Winston, that whole narrative was Jameis Winston. It wasn't Florida State. It wasn't Jimbo Fisher. It's just,
And I would say
oh, it's
the Jimbo thing. I think I'll give Jimbo this. I think it was a little Jimbo for the first 2 years. Once that kind of wore off, because remember, Jimbo was the heir apparent. They brought him in as the OC. They were rocking and rolling. You know what I mean? And not only that, but Bobby was getting a little old. He was becoming the senile old man. Poor thing. God rest his soul. That was like
yeah.
the worst thing they could have ever done to him.
He
Um,
was the last of the head coaches in waiting when that was a popular thing to do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so so like that's how the brand. And then you're right. After Jameis left, and the program spiraled into mediocrity, in my opinion. I mean, again, we were terrible too during that time, but let's just call
Yep.
it spade a spade. Yeah, their brand went down. And do you know who else is like that as well?
Give me a conference. I'll probably guess it from there.
Big 10.
Man, I can give you.
Penn
Let's
State.
talk Michigan. Well, Penn State hasn't been the same since
Since
Joe Paterno for sure.
since
But
the
I'll
Joe
even tell
since the
you,
Joe Pa scandal, James Franklin,
yeah,
I'm trying to say this in the nicest way. He's average. He's average.
yeah,
He will never win a championship. That guy he's not built for it. If he
yeah,
could, if he was competing with with Ohio State and Michigan every year, I would say sure. But the narrative that he's competing with them is literally a media narrative. Like Joel Klatt
yeah.
said it best a few weeks ago when Ohio State played Penn State. He's like, why are people talking about this rivalry like it's a rivalry? It's not a rivalry. Like
Nope.
Ohio State owns Penn State. I think it's like 13-1.
Yeah,
That's how long Ohio State has been owning Penn State. And like that's another brand. And I bring this all up because again, Penn State's number 4. It's like, bro, that's an old brand. Like that Penn State is irrelevant. Like, I'm sorry. Like they haven't played anyone. When they go to the playoffs, they're getting the doors blown on them, barring the fact that they are the home team. Like
yep,
unless people have to go to Happy Valley and play in like 30-degree, 20-degree weather in December, no one, they're not getting anywhere. They're not going to
no,
go anywhere. Especially if they run into a buzzsaw of a SEC team, forget it. An
Yep.
SEC team is going to destroy them. And so to me, it's just like it's going back to the whole super conference thing. You just have to look at these things. It's not about conference anymore. The conferences are that's becoming a dying thing, in my opinion, because you start getting into these like, yes, Texas is in the SEC, but I don't see Texas as an SEC team. You know what I
Nope.
mean? And I think people who are of an older generation of mine don't even see them as a Big 12 team, really. They're that old
I
Southwest
mean,
Conference. You know what I mean? Like that's it's a generational thing, right? I mean,
right.
I look at Texas and Oklahoma as Big 12 teams, but again, that's just because that's when I grew up. That's the conference they were in. But again, conferences weren't a big thing in the 80s and early 90s. You didn't get this whole conference like glory thing till like the late 90s, early 2000s.
When TV really started becoming a factor and television rights deals becoming a really big factor into it is
Exactly.
really when you started seeing it. Because before then, think of it this way: before like cable really went in on sports, it was all broadcast television, so you could only really watch college football. Sorry, young kids, we're gonna do a little history lesson here for a minute. You were only like, what do you mean there are only like 10 channels at the time? It's like, yeah, ABC had college football, CBS had college football. Fox was really late to the party on
No.
it. It was really those are the two, and then
Yeah.
ESPN started covering it. That was it. That's all you had.
Yep.
So like once other cable networks started coming out and saying, "Oh, we'll do it too," like when you started getting the Fox Sportses of the regionalities of South and West and Pacific, and yeah, that's when it really started taking off. So I mean, if you look back in the day, like Miami, the music that everyone associates with the SEC was the CBS college football theme. Miami was on that all the time, so you used to
Yeah.
hear it even in our games.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you.
And I think what's going to force teams and conferences to, excuse me, to go into this super league system too is looking back at the thing, the Texases, the Tennessees, the Ole Miss, the Georgias, right? Those guys are eating good now. But there's a whole other half of a conference that is not, and they're never going to. And they know that. And so for them, they're going to be like, "Well, we need to make sure we shore up everything that we can on our end. We're going to go talk. And then we'll just go leave." And then no one's going to watch. I mean, yes, maybe they will, but no one's going to watch a 6-team SEC. Like that's great, but then who are they going to fill their schedule with? Because when you
Yep.
have these other teams, let's say there's an exodus of teams from the Big 10 and the SEC, which people who are watching this are probably like, that's never going to happen, Chris. You're so out of the field. But when money's involved, believe me, this is actually more plausible than you think. No one's going to want to play them. And then it's going to be like the whole like, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. And I think teams are going to recognize, especially when you see teams that are not playing well when they go cross country, right? I forgot which team it was in the Big 10, but they're like 0 and 4 when they're on the road, especially when they have to go to the other side of the country. And you're
Like
going to see,
Washington or something.
yeah, I forgot who it was. Maybe it was like Rutgers or Maryland or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
It wasn't like a big team, but the reason why I use those examples is because they're not going to want to lose these games every year, especially
yeah.
when they know they can compete in these local games, right? And so you're going to have people who are going to, again, you see in the story, you saw that like some Big 12, some Big 10, and some SEC schools were interested. I think that's because you're going to get a model where the ACC is going to start paying schools. That's what I was leading to, by the way. I've come full circle. I think the ACC is going to settle with Clemson and FSU to keep them here because no one's going to want them on top of that. And they're going to pay them more money. And then it's going to become a pay for play. And then once the
Yep.
ACC does that, you are blind, deaf, and dumb if you think that the SEC and the Big Ten won't do the same thing. And then once
Yep.
that happens, Indiana's, Purdue's, Iowa's, Nebraska's, especially Nebraska, they're not going to deal with that. They're going to be like, absolutely not. We're not doing that. CSFL, OBDGYN, Project Rudy, like pigskin, whatever you're called. Let's meet up. Let's talk. Again,
Let's get in those stirrups and let's talk.
exactly. I can't imagine. Again, everyone's like trying to like do this dance, and I'm just like, it's not musical chairs, guys. Like, there's enough chairs for everyone. I mean, is it going to be the old glory days of the last like 10 years where the SEC, like an Ole Miss is going to get paid way more than, or not Ole Miss, a Mississippi State's going to get paid way more than like a Clemson? No. But would you rather have money than no money? Because that's realistically where you're going to end up if you don't figure this out. It's going to become musical chairs where if you don't settle out and figure this out fast enough, there's not going to be enough chairs for everyone. And you will see the Bamas, the Georgias, the Texases. They're all going to be like, no, there's no way, there's no world where Vanderbilt, Ole Miss should be getting the same money as us. I just I don't see it. I'm like I don't know. Do you see it?
I don't want to see it. I'm just so I'm so skeptical of the bias against Miami to see that they're going to go through, because I think part of the issue with competition is that they say, oh, well, Miami's not really that big of a brand. Oh, no matter how many times we sell out someone else's stadium, no matter how many times you get better TV ratings, you play Miami, there's always that little thing in the back that says, oh, don't give them too much money, because if they get back to what they were, we're all in trouble. So that's the
Well,
only thing that I worry about as a Miami conspiracy theorist with my
so I
format.
I thought that too until I did some research this year and how
Here's
well
my
our
flow. This is my
I
flow
love you.
hat.
That needs to be a prop from now on, and that needs to come in. I love it. I thought the same thing too until I started to see how powerful our collective is, and TV doesn't impact our collective. So my thing is I actually think the media and I think the good old boys, if we're going to say there is one group, I think they recognize that Miami is not going to go anywhere and that they're going to be a problem and that you get on. Have you noticed that no one has mentioned our name in terms of conference realignment? Why is
Yep.
that? Why
The
is that?
last time I think Miami was mentioned in conference realignment was in the offseason, where they were saying that Miami might go to the Big 12, and the only rumors there were like the AC the Big 10 is not interested and the SEC aren't interested. But
Yeah,
again,
okay,
this is a new season.
one that was from some. Those were from a bunch of Big 12 bloggers. There's no
Yes, it
way in
was stupid.
there's
It
no
was
way in
stupid.
hell Miami's going to the Big 12. It's a lateral move. Not only that, no what Miami does not want to go play a bunch of teams out west and
I agree.
a bunch of B leagues. Anyone who believes that you're an idiot.
I
Two,
agree.
the if anything, I do think the SEC or the Big 10 would be interested for two different reasons. Regionality, one for the SEC, and you get to keep that rivalry between Florida and Miami. Two, in the Big 10, you have that whole AAC accreditation, whatever the hell it is,
Oh, AAU, yeah.
AAU, whatever the hell it is, and
Yep.
Miami is one. And the pretentious people up north love that. And guess what they would also love? A flag and a footprint in the state of Florida. And no
Yep.
one wants Florida State. Again, and they're not AAU accredited either way. And they're trying to do that right now. But are they going to get it in the next couple of years in time? I don't know. And I don't think so. You know what I
Nope.
mean? So it's like, to me, I think Miami's actually been playing. I think they're doing a whole mafia thing again. Tinfoil, go ahead, put it on, Rudy. They're doing a whole mafia thing, and they're letting FSU and Clemson do all the dirty work, and they're talking behind the scenes, and they're like, hey, when y'all are ready, you let me know, because again, the collective that Miami has is so powerful, and the landing of Cam Ward again, this is good. I think Billy Corbin's going to be should note this in the next U. Landing Cam Ward was not just landing an elite QB. It wasn't opening the spot for other QBs to come and win a Heisman here. It was really showcasing that the chains were off Miami. There is
Hmm.
nothing holding us back. There is no entity that's going to overlook us. And the NCAA is basically as good as dead at this point. There's going to be no sanctions against us. And all the things we would have got sanctioned for are now legal. So to me, it's just like, I think it's a matter of time before we either jump to the SEC or Big 12 or this whole super conference thing starts getting in. And then I think we are naturally part of the halves because again, when you look at, I never would have thought this, but when you heard all the things in this offseason about FSU's collective and how they can't get any money together really, and they're already in debt with the stadium revisions and suing the ACC. I think we look a lot better. I think we're in a lot better of a position. But we've talked way too much non-football. Let's get into some football. We got some week 12 predictions and things. Let's first talk about the do or die game between Georgia and Tennessee. This is a major game that again, everyone saw it at the beginning of the season. It was something I put a pin in because I really wanted to see how Tennessee, because everyone's talking Tennessee and like how great they were going to be this year. Little lackluster. They only have one loss, which is great, but they're definitely not the powerhouse that they look like the first 4 games. What are you looking for, and what do you think is going to happen tomorrow, Rudy, between these two?
This one's playing between the hedges in Athens, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, this is Georgia's game. It's just one of those things where Tennessee is a different team at home. They still struggle offensively when they need to. I'm taking Georgia the whole way only because it's at home and they are a more consistent team.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Georgia as well for the pure fact that Nico Imaliava is still in the concussion protocol, which means he will most likely not play. And when he's
Yep.
not in there, I mean, you're basically chopping your left foot off. I will say it will most likely be a really close game. I don't think I think if you looked at this at the beginning of the season, you would look at this as like a 45 to 35 or 42 to 30 game. I think it might be a little bit lower. I think we might be more looking at more like a 28 to 21 or like a 28 to 24 game, mainly because Tennessee's bread and butter is their run game, is
Yep.
the running. And so I think if they can keep running the ball, they can keep Georgia off the field. That's great. But even if Georgia gets on the field, I mean, Carson Beck is just throwing picks like it's like he's Oprah giving interceptions. You know what I mean?
You get a pick. You get a pick. You get a pick. Everyone gets a
Gets a
pick.
pick.
Yep.
I mean, nine interceptions in the last 4 games, I think is what it's been, is insane. Like that's
Yeah.
and this was coming from a guy who's a Heisman candidate at the beginning of the season. Like people picked him to be a Heisman finalist, and that's definitely not happening. So I think it'll be closer than what a lot of people thought it was supposed to be. And I think what a lot of people think it's going to be because of that exact factor. You're not going to have Tennessee's not going to have their star um quarterback, and then Georgia's also struggling to get their run game going, and their quarterback is just absolutely abysmal these last few games. So I'm still picking Georgia. It's a home game and it's Georgia. They know they want to get into the playoffs, and so I think they win. They're going to win out. They'll make it into the playoffs. We'll go from there. Moving over to the Big 12, I just love the Big 12 because it's the circle of chaos.
ACC light.
It is. It is literally the ACC light. I mean, what do you want to talk about first? Colorado versus Utah or BYU versus Kansas?
Let's go Colorado first.
Okay.
Only because it's more of like the sexier thing to talk about right now with Travis Hunter and all this promotion they've been doing.
I think Utah is going to come out guns blazing. They're going to be pissed because of that holy war, what happened last week. And they're going to come out, and I think they're going to give Colorado a run for their money. I think they may even actually win and knock Colorado out of contention for the Big 12.
That's a good upset alert. I mean, Utah's been an abysmal team all
They
season. I
have
know it's
they're they're
getting
ra-
towards
they're
the
racked
end.
with injury. Yeah, they're racked with injury too.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, look, I would be pleased if that happened. I'm still going to take Colorado, but I will happily give you your flowers on Sunday or
I'm
whatever we
kidding.
do our reaction
I'm not picking Utah, bro. They're gutted. They're gutted.
show.
They're playing Zach Wilson's brother.
I'll,
Zach
I'll
Wilson's
still
brother.
I'll still say that if even let's say you're still picking Colorado, but just because you've already mentioned, hey, there might be a chance here, I'm still giving you credit for it.
Okay, fair enough. But again, not going to be surprised. I'll have zero surprise if Utah wins this, only because, like I said, I would be pissed. And they're going to come out pissed. And they want to spoil something because they're not going anywhere. And
Yep.
they're not in contention for it. So I think the other game, the BYU Kansas game, everyone's like, Kansas, they suck. They're one of the worst teams in the Big 12. They've lost all their games by one possession.
Yep.
They're a sneakily bad team. Like they're not really that bad. They're just like, it's like the ball bounced the wrong way. And they spoiled Iowa State, who was supposed to go to the championship. Like that in its, I'm like, this team, and they're actually doing pretty well these last few games. So I wouldn't, again, I think BYU will win it out, but I think they're going to play it very close. I think it's going to be a very close game. What do you think?
I got BYU also. I'd like to see a close game. The only problem is, did beating Iowa State put you back on the radar? Like, by doing that, it's like, can you do it twice? That's the only thing that I'm worried about. So that's why I'm going BYU.
I think, but again, the worst thing is a team that has nothing to lose, and Kansas
Yep.
has nothing to lose, and BYU has everything to lose, and then BYU is also going to see Kansas coming in. They're like, Kansas, easy, and Ooh, I think it could be like a Georgia Tech thing for them.
God,
Again, I think they could. I think they're expected to win. They should win, but don't be surprised if those Jayhawks, come back and put a hurting on them and squeak one out. You know.
yeah.
Well, Rudy, we have another one in the books. It was great getting to catch up with you this week. I know we didn't get to talk about our Canes that much, but I'm sure next week when we play Wake Forest for Senior Day, we'll have plenty to talk about. Anything interesting happening this week for you? Anything you wanna highlight before we sign off?
Uh, I wish I said I had a more interesting week. It was just hectic.
Yeah, mine was I just riddled with a stomach virus and I'm barely getting this show together. That's why it was a little all over the place. So thank you everyone for watching. If you haven't yet, like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you thought about our playoff, our thoughts, the Super League, and then our picks this week. We would love to hear from you guys. But until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend, and as always, go Canes.
Michael Jordan, you had the flu game today, playing this way, playing like this.
Exactly. That's how it felt, bro. Bro, well, we'll see you guys next week for our week 13 preview and our preview for the Wake Forest game. Have a great day, gals.